In tonight's Government Insider, streamlining immigration. U.S. Citizen and Immigration Services has spent more than $1 billion on a project to replace its old inefficient system. But now a new report by the Washington Post shows not much progress has been made. For insight, we turn to our guest tonight on Capitol Insider, Francis Rose, federal government expert, host and publisher at francisrose.com. All right, Francis, this project was supposed to create a system of digitized records and a suite of nearly 100 electronic forms that could be easily accessed by those wanting to gain access to the U.S. Now, a decade later, only one of those forms is online, and it's costing taxpayers. You surprised by these findings?
Well, there are a lot of people who follow federal government information technology, Morris, that aren't surprised by this. We had conversations when Healthcaregov debuted several years back.
Right.
And these are a lot of the same problems that appear to have plagued Healthcaregov's rollout. It's not just the issue with the money. This system was supposed to be complete by 2013, so it's also 2 years behind schedule in addition to the cost issues. And that's the same thing that we've seen time after time after time with federal government information technology. Now, we haven't seen a complete post-mortem of the issue at CIS, but from reports that we've seen in the Washington Post and other outlets, it appears that the same thing went on with this system at CIS that went on with Healthcare.gov and other issues. It appears what the problem was changing requirements on the part of the government and maybe an inability of the contractor, in this case it was IBM, to be able to keep up with the changing requirements that the government laid out there. And not that they couldn't execute it, it's just that not everything that the government wants a contractor to do is possible to do on top of the work that they've already done to fulfill a contract. So there are cases where a vendor has to go back and start recoding something, or there are some cases, as we saw in Healthcare.gov, where you just can't get that to do that
right
in conjunction with other pieces that are out there. It appears that's what's the case with the CIS problem.
Not only was it supposed to be finished by 2013, it cost $500 million. Now the agency says it's projected to cost more than $3 billion and won't be done for another 4 years. So how did it get this bad, Francis? Or should we just start again from the very beginning and abandon this?
Well, that's the question that we always ask in cases like this, and that's the question especially that members of Congress ask in cases like this, because they've thrown a lot of money at this problem already. So if they start from scratch, that's all wasted money.
Yeah.
Is there anything salvageable out of this is the question that I would expect members of Congress to want to examine in the coming weeks and months. And that's when they'll make a determination of, are we going to continue to fund this, or are we going to try to start over and fund something from scratch? It really doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, in my view, that Congress would give up entirely, but we've seen stranger things happen in the past, Morris.
There's also the politics, as you know. Immigration reform has been making its way through Capitol Hill. Even if the project were to be completed in the next few years, will more money be spent to make sure it fits the latest immigration changes? Yeah,
that's a great point, and that's potentially a factor in what's driven the cost up in this and stretched out the timeline. If this has been built with the anticipation that the immigration system would follow policy track A, and it turns out in the middle of it the government decided to follow policy track B or didn't make any decisions at all, maybe the system needed to do something different than it was originally drawn up to do. I don't know that for a fact, but it certainly is within the realm of possibility. And the politics of all of that, you're exactly right, could determine what happens to this next.
Let's switch gears to OPM. The agency has hired a cybersecurity expert to help clean up the mess from the massive data breach. What do we know about this new hire?
His name is Clifton Triplett Morris, and he joins the Office of Personnel Management from the private sector. He has about 30 years of experience in building cybersecurity infrastructure in the private sector, and he will join OPM. His sole responsibility is going to be to stand up cybersecurity infrastructure there to protect federal employees' information. You may recall during our conversations about the OPM cyber breaches, there were two, not just one.
Right.
That was the big issue. The information of federal employees, especially the most egregious one, the removal of the security clearance information, has exposed the personal information of federal employees all around the world, and even people who didn't work for the government but who applied to work for the federal government, to hackers. It's most likely that that information is in the hands of the Chinese government now. So Mr. Triplett's role will be to build a very secure infrastructure for the Office of Personnel Management to hold that information so that that kind of hack doesn't happen again.
He has a lot on his plate, Francis. What obstacles will he face, like the major one?
Well, the most major obstacle that he'll probably face is whatever his IT infrastructure needs become.
Yeah.
Will he run into the same problem that Customs and Immigration ran into and that Healthcare.gov ran into?
Right.
Or will he follow the new agile development theory that a lot of federal agencies are following and having a lot of success with in building projects in pieces, making sure this small piece works before they add on the next small piece and then the next small piece? If he does that, he has a very good chance of being successful, Morris.
Good point. Francis Rose, federal government expert, host and publisher at francisrose.com. Thanks again.
Thank you, Morris.